And welcome to another edition of the Nerdy Agent Podcast. I'm your host, Luke Pettersen, here with my brothers and fellow nerds, Josh and AJ. There's not much to talk about for sports this week. Royce Lewis hits a lot of home runs.
No one wants to listen to that content anyways.
We usually talk about something about the Minnesota sports. Royce Lewis is the best player in baseball. That's pretty fun.
Yep.
This week on the Nerdy Agent Podcast, we want to talk about growing teams and specifically retention of good agents and what that looks like. The reason we wanted to bring it up is we were chatting with someone last week kind of on this topic, and I thought it might be helpful for a different demographic of viewers here. We talk a lot about how new agents can work on stuff to grow their business, but I thought maybe some agents are in the position where they're thinking, I want to start growing a team, or I've been trying to grow a team and hasn't been going well. So we wanted to hit on kind of the major topics on how the Advisor Realty Group was built, which we've talked about, and how you can do that at scale as well. So to start, can you just give like a brief rundown on our team, how it was built over the last, 5 years would be the 6 years?
7 years.
7 years.
7 years.
Time goes fast, doesn't it?
Yeah. I started a team. I probably talked about this before on here, but I just randomly ran into a guy who was selling me door-to-door CenturyLink, and I told him he wasn't making enough money and he was too good at sales, so I asked him if he would have coffee, and it took him a little while. Him and his wife actually became clients of mine before he got his real estate license. And then, one way to get business, just ask people questions when they're knocking on your door. But he eventually was, more and more interested in it, and really hit the ground running. Sold a house in his first week. Another past client of mine later joined, and then Luke was the third agent on the team before we switched to EXP. And, I realized early on that the number one thing that I could offer folks was just mentorship, right? So I was like, hey, man, I've already done this. Can I just teach you how to do it? And taught those three basically just, hey, let's sit in a room together every day and work. And you ask me questions and I mentor you and kind of help you. But quickly realized, and as I've had more conversations with, teams, like Luke said, talking to a team last week, that's the main thing that most, quote unquote teams are offering, right? Is just mentorship. And mentorship is great until the mentee realizes that they can already do this by themselves. So why am I paying you for mentorship that I don't need anymore? And so as I learned that, I started to shift into, hey, we need to have an employee, right? Because
so let's just stop there for a second.
That's great.
So I just want to get to the team. So we left EXP. Now, for the last 5 years, we've been growing with these different pieces that we're going to talk about. Now we're at about 40 agents is what we've gotten to. Yep. And just a note here, because I do think that the number one thing is retaining good agents, right? Anybody can retain an agent that's going to sell 3 houses, because where are they going to go? What are they going to do? It's when the person gets to 20, 30 that they start to look at you and go, what more do you have for me? So if you are starting a team right now, the number one piece there to start with would be find somebody that's probably newer, that you've done more business than, that you have more knowledge than them, and help them learn to grow their business, give them mentorship would be the number one piece.
Well, honestly, though, at the same time, if you're thinking about starting a team, the first thing you should do is ask yourself why you're feeling like you should. Because I think what we've seen is too frequently, people just feel like, well, I was a good agent, so now I need to be a team leader. It's the next iteration of my business. But people that go that route don't often have much success from a team standpoint, because what we hear a lot is well, I just pour energy into these newer agents that I bring on, and then they just leave me, and I'm frustrated. And you hear more of a it's about me kind of mentality in some of those conversations, where it's I did this for them, and then they went and did something else. Because to AJ's point, one, essentially all you did was bring somebody in and offer the mentorship. But also, it seems like a lot of people are doing it for themselves as their next thing in their career, rather than thinking about, does this fit in terms of what I want to create from a legacy standpoint, or what I want to build for others within this industry? So I think what we've said to people from the start has been, the goal of this team has always been just, how can you be helpful to other people? It's the goal of my personal real estate business too, but if you start from a why of, I want to help other people have a career in real estate and do what I can to support them, and then continue to build out, TJ, what he's going to talk about next, build out the right systems, processes, tools to help them have even more success down the road and keep them wanting to stay and working with us, then you'll have more success in doing this. But if you don't start with the why and you just say, well, I need to build a team now, you're probably going to find yourself in some of the spirals that we're going to talk about. And you maybe should be reevaluating whether or not this is even the right thing for you to do.
I think that's a super good piece too, because you either say that, well, I guess it's the next thing for me to do, or they start to look at some of the bigger teams, and without realizing the amount of effort and work and why they did it,
and financial
they go,
risk.
wow, they're doing so well, making so much money. I want to make a lot of money.
Yep.
There's another way people do that. And that just never, I mean, if you're a real estate agent, having clients and having them know that all you're trying to do is make a bunch of money is never going to grow a successful business. And so that is a piece that, just from AJ's standpoint, you've always said to me, you wanted to help people have a career in real estate and do really well and be successful and make money and support their families. And that literally started from the first agent, because you literally looked at them and said, you are not making enough money. I want to help you make more money, is what you did.
Yeah.
And we're not going to get into the dollars, but there was a lot of money sunken into the team for the first 3 years that you didn't see anything back. It was negative for a while until it started getting big and getting built more. So that is a good piece on making sure you know why you want to do it. As you get growing, let's say you do want to do it, you have the right reasons, you get started, you add some agents. That's when people start getting into the situations where their agents get good and then they leave. So talk about kind of retention and growing from there that you were going to get to.
Yeah. And like I said, I was there, right, with 3 people. We had, maybe part-time help, and realizing that, as soon as they get to 20, 30 sales, they're going to go, I'm just going to do this on my own. I'm going to start my own team, or I'm going to be a solo agent and kind of figure this out. So I quickly realized we need to put some systems in place, for one, which is, again, coming from the right lens is very important, because if you don't, then you look at it as, I'm going to spend money and time on something for these agents, and I'm not going to get anything in return potentially, rather than looking at it as, I'm going to spend money and time to support these people so they can become more efficient and sell more homes. And so currently we use a product called Paperless Pipeline to manage transaction coordination, listing coordination. That's the first thing that most teams need to do, is create a task list for a purchase agreement gets completed. Now what happens, right? And it needs to be something either that agent can follow, or if you do have an employee, that employee can follow. And we just kind of did them both together and hired our first staff member. And that's a really difficult thing to do. It's easier for us now to hire people because we're hiring for more specific roles. I still think all of our roles are still very broad. But they're far less broad than they were at the beginning. We hired Zoe, was our first ever employee. She was doing transaction coordination, listing coordination, social media, marketing, branding, content creation, event planning, managing our database. Like, she was doing everything. And so to find somebody that's good at everything is impossible. Like, there's not one person in the world that is good at all of those things. So you try to find what's most important to us. I would probably argue at the beginning, you want to find someone that can lightly do marketing, but is super organized, type A, and really good at the coordination aspect, because that's the part you have to nail to create that client experience from the start. And we've kind of gone through those phases. And then, obviously we hired a marketing person next. So then that took that piece off of that number one employee's plate. So then she was just doing listing coordination, transaction coordination, that kind of thing, right?
So just to touch on the first employee, which I think is a really important piece. There are a lot of people don't want to spend the, 50, 60, 70, 40, whatever it is, $1,000 a year that you have to spend to hire an employee. But the really important piece there is from a scaling perspective. And they even talk about this I've heard it too many times, right? So we are kind of reiterating this. Even a successful agent by themselves should probably have an employee, because you yourself, when you hired the transaction coordinator, went from
29 sales to 55 in 1 year.
Exactly, which happens pretty quickly. I myself and Josh have been fortunate to never have to coordinate our own transactions, so we're able to scale without that. But it removes a huge back end piece to a transaction that doesn't really produce anything for the agent. They're able to then take those hours and go out and get more business and sell more houses, which then actually does produce. And so the scaling effect of that first employee is absolutely massive.
Well, and there's also the component of, you think about financials, right? Because I do a lot of the financial management for our company. As a leader, when you get to the point where you're going to start a team, just make sure you also think about the employee that you're hiring, how essentially they're also subsidizing your personal business, right? So you're starting a team, but probably be thoughtful about you personally being at a point in which financially, if your team doesn't produce anything, this employee is still adding value for your own personal business. You have to be able to have enough time to be able to go in and actually focus on the team side, but there still has to be revenue coming in to account for this expense at a meaningful enough scale. But it should be able to create a cost benefit for you just personally to say, if I pay somebody $60,000, I can go do more transactions to get that $60,000 back personally. And this person can then be subsidized across the rest of the team employees that I'm bringing in and offer some sort of benefit that then I can use to help go recruit agents to this group, right? So I'm trying to I guess I'm speaking more logistically in terms of how you do some of these things and the financials associated with them. But that's, I think, also a key component is if you just go hire a TC, but you're not producing on your own end, you're going to find your numbers upside down pretty quickly because you shouldn't expect your team to come in and produce at a high level immediately.
So I want to, and we could get into all of the employees, but I think that would be in the weeds just because these agents aren't we're not talking about 40, 60 agent teams here, right? More like 5 to 10 agents. And so that's an important first piece. So you can mentor agents. Once they get good enough, you can retain with the systems and processes of transaction coordination.
Sorry, keep doing
you
that.
just keep knocking my You can retain with the systems and processes and an employee from a transaction coordination perspective. As you grow, you maybe would add one more employee to split out buy side and sell side deals, listing coordination versus buying coordination,
marketing,
or some marketing stuff. After that, outside of the employees, because they don't need to hire as many as we have quite a few. What would be the next step to continue to retain these agents that say you've given them the transaction coordination, now they're selling 25 houses a year, and they're looking at you going, well, I could figure out how to just do that myself.
Yeah, you got to create opportunity. That's what we talk about a lot. And opportunity sometimes does come into play right around the time when you do get staff and systems. I would say we went through all three of these things pretty quickly, right? Like we had an agent, the first agent I already had some online lead opportunities for him. It just wasn't as many. And then it's about balancing how many you have. So we now have an immense amount of opportunity to the point where many of our agents work primarily just with leads that we provide to them.
In a lot of cases, we have more than they'll even be able to take.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a great setup, and I got us on this new program 4 years ago, and what that's done is, the partnership with Zillow has been kind of like a proprietary almost like thing where it's not available really very many other places, and that makes retaining, especially those agents that really rely on taking those leads, it helps to retain them, just knowing that until they have enough personal production, the whole making a switch doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense. So you're able to scale pretty effectively and efficiently. But we've even gone into iterations way beyond those three things, where it's additional layers of support. And we're always thinking about what more can we do. We've talked about, do we hire a showing agent? We have, not to get into all the employees, but we have so many people that are doing so many things to support the agents that recreating it now would be difficult. We see most of our competition coming in the form of probably other teams that are at similar sizes now more than anything.
Yeah, and I think a couple key points. One, to my first comment, focus on the North Star, right? And so for us, the North Star has always been help people have success and do whatever you can to support others that are going to be joining your team. And then the next comment would be, from there, when you think about action, you don't have to just follow the action plan we're kind of laying out. But AJ's given like high level steps as you iterate and grow. But I think more than that, like the point that I would make and what he's kind of done as those steps have come into play is just like always been thinking about what is the next right thing for supporting that North Star. So it's like, where are my agents at right now? What do they need? How do I provide that? So just keep doing what you think is the next right thing. And if you get to a point where you don't know what the next right thing is, find other team leaders or people that have done this that can provide you with that insight. So part of what's been helpful here is, and this is not a recruiting pitch on EXP, but our structure within our group at EXP is a lot of really good mentorship of people that have done it before you. So we join under a team that's one step ahead of us, kind of I mean, like if you think about where they're at, they've just kind of been 1 year ahead of us or 2 years ahead of us in terms of where their production is. So anytime you get to the point of a roadblock and you say, what is the next right thing? You call people that have already gotten through that roadblock and you start getting ideas, and then you do the next right thing and you keep growing that way. Lastly, what I'll say is, to the point of that North Star, we try to think about every one of our agents. Often we have touch points for them within the team. We have a lot of collaboration with all of the members, but also one-on-one mentorship, leadership structures focused on trying to understand where people are at any given time. A, we want them to feel important and heard and seen because we want them to know that they matter to us. But B, when we think about how do we continue to retain, and I think that's one of the strongest points of this team is people just really haven't, like in the last few years, no one's left because we're checking in a lot. We know where they're at. And if there's ever things that we find where we go, because we've hit the point of like, oh shoot, we have now some top producing agents that are getting to the point where maybe they don't need the leads anymore. We find new ways to try to create value for them so they still feel connected and like they belong and like it's the right thing to stay. So every person understanding where they're at on their journey within your team and not just building a one-size-fits-all approach that allows you to be able to build a team where you're going to retain people, you're going to feel like they're invested, you're going to build the right culture that gets you to the point you want to be at.
I want to touch on the opportunities piece again, too, just quickly, because I do think the one unique situation we have, AJ is going to knock my microphone over again.
On my armrest.
The unique, who set this microphone up?
Chase.
The unique piece we have that I think isn't, it's not replicable, right? The Zillow Flex stuff isn't super replicable. There are other ways for leaders to provide opportunities to their agents. We've ran Facebook ads. We have the advisorymn.com that we've ran Google PPC to. We've done Real Geeks. We've done YLOPO. We've done Sierra. There
just
are
having
other
listings to hold open is
that was the next one I was going to get on was we're on lists with big teams because at EXP, like Josh talked about, not to beat how good EXP is too much, but we have other teams at EXP that we work with because it's mutually advantageous to work together, that there must be 30 listings a week that we could host an open house on. If somebody on our team wanted to host 5 open houses a week, they could do that starting tomorrow, right? So having connections with people to provide those opportunities as well would be huge. Do you have any other touches on
I don't think so.
growing the team? If you are an agent out there listening to this and you don't want to grow a team, but you're going, man, that team sounds pretty cool. We do always like to just plug the Advisor Realty Group. We're growing right now. We're trying to add agents basically all the time. So if you are interested and you think you might be a good fit, DM us, reach out to us somewhere. We're on social media. I'm sure you can find us. And that's all we have this week.
Well, I think also though, if you want to grow a team, but you don't feel like this gives you all the answers or you have more questions coming out of this, like I said, our approach has always been just do what we can to help people. So if you run into any roadblocks and you have questions and you want to reach out and you want to talk to us, like we are totally accessible. We're totally open to chatting. And so we'd love to just hear from people. If there's questions, concerns, thoughts, whatever, like reach out directly, send a note to the Nerdy Agent Podcast on Instagram, email us, whatever. We're here for you.
And that's all we have this week on the Nerdy Agent Podcast. And as always, remember, be better.
Bye-bye now.